Recording in first week, people aren't talking very much. Second week, not that much engaged. Third week, but you're loving on them, you're pouring into them, you're kind of getting after it with them. And let's say 6 weeks into the group, a couple girls ask some questions, some conversations start up. Those are wins. Those are wins because that wasn't happening 6 weeks ago, right? And then week 7 rolls around, and one of the girls raised her hand. She's like, "Man, I'm not sure what to do. I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do, but I'm really struggling with pornography, and I don't know how to handle it. Is there any, like, I just feel like I need to tell somebody." Now, that girl's not saying that again unless relationships, trust. She's now being vulnerable with all the group and all that stuff. Does that make sense? Here's what happens. Now she's vulnerable in the group, and you ladies, like, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for your courage for sharing that. I know that must be difficult to share in a group like this, but we want you to know that we got your back and we're here for you." And we establish confidentiality as a marker of our groups. In fact, I say this in my groups. I say, if you say something in this group, outside of this group, you're out. Like, you kick me out of church? No, I'm kicking you out of the group, though. You ain't in this group anymore. So you can't do that. Oh, of course I can. Yes, I can. I am not going to sacrifice these other 7 girls because you don't have the maturity to be in here. Yes, you're out. You know what I'm saying? And but here's what happens. It puts them on notice that I'm not going to share other people's business outside the group because that hurts me getting to accountability. It's like, "Oh my goodness, come over here. Sit in this chair." Girl comes over. She sits in the chair. "Ladies, come on. We're going to pray over her right now." Now, what did I just do? I just invited the ladies into this moment. We're praying over. I might even say, "Hey, Jessica, would you mind praying over her right now? Actually, I'll pray. Why don't you pray? And then Judy, why don't you close?" You know what I'm saying? And you pray over this girl. Then you get done praying over her. Then you say this, "All right, listen, we're going to help you. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to battle for you this week. We're all going to be praying for you this week. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We got the text chain going with our group, all this other stuff. Here's what's going to happen. Michelle, you got her on Monday. And Sarah, you got her on Tuesday. And Monique, you got her on Wednesday. And here's what that means if you got her. On that day, on Monday, you're going to text her scripture. You're going to text her prayer. You're gonna be praying for her. You're gonna be bound for her. And the rest of us, we're gonna be praying for you as you encourage her. You're gonna ask her how she's doing for that day. And then I, as a leader, I'm going to be texting you too. And I'm gonna ask you how things are going. I'm gonna text you scripture you can be doing. Now you're helping that girl connect to that girl. And now the girls start getting into this sort of broth of accountability with each other. Now they're sharing scripture with each other. They're praying for each other. You get what I'm saying? And you do that. Now here's what happens. The other girls just saw how you handled that situation. What do you think just happened with them? Their trust just went up. So now another girl, same day, raised her hand in the group. She goes, "Hey, I'm struggling with self-harm. I don't know how to tell them what to do. Oh my goodness, thank you so much for your courage. You sit in this chair. We're going to pray for you right now. Hey, Jessica, I know you got her on Monday. You know what? You got her on Monday too. You're just a Monday girl. You better be prayed up for Monday. I got you. I'm holding you up. You know what I'm saying? You got her on Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm drawing the girls and everyone into what's happening in this group or whatever. Now here's the deal. The next 2 weeks will be the best small groups you've ever had with these girls in your entire life. I promise you. They will be incredible. They will be talking. They'll be whatever. You won't get them to shut up. You'll be like, "Oh my goodness, like, we need a longer small group. Like, we don't have enough time." They won't stop. Now here's the deal. If you want to end that in a moment, end it in a moment. 2 weeks later, have 2 new girls join the group. When that happens, they all have relationships with each other, but those 2 new girls come in and they don't have relationships, they don't trust them. So they're back here again, and they'll shut down. They will shut down every time. And then what will happen is you'll kind of find this will happen in churches and student ministries. They just kind of cycle right here. And the only time this ever happens is when they go to camp. Cry night. Man, my girls were opening up to me about all this stuff. All this stuff. Let me tell you something. That happens every week in my student ministry. We don't have to wait for camp for that. Because what happens is, let me say this, and I got you. What happens is that now I'm at camp with them for 100 hours. for the week. And you're spending time with them. You're spending all day with them. You're hanging out with them. All this type of stuff. And by the time you get to Wednesday night, they start getting vulnerable. And then they start opening up. And they start doing that. You know what I'm saying? Because check it out. Check it out. All the girls are the same in the group all week long. It's the same people. So they had time to build relationships with them. But remember what I said earlier? A lot of these kids, they're coming 2 to 3 times a week, you know what I'm saying, to your ministry. And they're popping in and out, all this type of stuff. New kids are coming in, they're doing all this type of stuff. And so when they do that, in order for them to have the same amount of time that they have at camp, they got to spend about 45 weeks in your student ministry to have the same amount of hours that they have there when you're only meeting 2 hours a week. And then if an hour of that time is worship and teaching, then you really only have about 1 hour of relationship time on that week. Does that make sense? So again, I'm not trying to create problems or say this or say this. Here's what I am saying. I'm saying these are the things that I think about. These are the things that I want to talk to you about to say, hey, from a relationship standpoint, raising the bar of accountability. If I believe that there's a lid to discipleship unless accountability is taking place, I then have to mitigate the relationship hours that I need in order to do that, right? So that is, man, I might have to engage these girls outside of student ministry sometimes. I might have to go take them for coffee. I might have to do some different things like this in order to try to elevate some of that type of stuff. But then I also have to think about how my groups are, how I design my groups, because how I design my groups can actually affect whether we're able to do this or not. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's really important to navigate through. You know what I'm saying? Now your question.
That's my question. Is like, do you have closed groups when new people come in, they go into a new group?
So I was telling him, I do 2 groups. So I have an open group and a closed group. The open group, so and again, I'm not, this is like, I'm not, again, this doesn't mean go change, do whatever you're doing. Here's what we do. On a ministry night, they break out into groups, but every kid goes to a group, but we don't talk about the lesson. We don't, it's not about discipleship, it's about relationship on that night because it's a connection group. And the reason we do that is it makes a large ministry feel small. It connects every student to a leader and every leader to a student. Then I tell my core kids, my kids that are here, I go, you are here to build relationships. This group isn't for you. This group is for the other kids. Help them feel connected. Get outside of yourself. Don't be clicking up with each other. Y'all shouldn't even be talking to each other. You should be talking to them. And so for the guys group, I always use this example. In the guys group, you might come in this week and be like, yo, what's up? What's up, fellas? Hey, tonight we're going to do man night. We're going to do thumb war contest, push-up contest, and a plank contest. We're going to see the toughest guy in the room is, oh, let's go. You know what I mean? And you're going to get points or whatever. And you might do something like that. We give our leaders like 100 connection group ideas. If they have a QR code for each one, they can click on it and, kind of do it. And the leaders have the freedom to lead it however they want. I don't even care if they do the same thing every week. Like if it's some girls, y'all just want to sit around and talk life or whatever. As long as you're building relationships and connected or whatever, that's how we do that. But then we do closed groups on a separate night during the week for 2 hours. And those are for the kids that are here. And that creates an engine for us to be able to do that. I'm not like promoting a model. I'm not trying to say change to that or that type of stuff. I'm just saying that's how I solve this problem. So the kids that are here, they get fired up to go and be a part of it. So they are then able to bring to account, they are able to get to accountability, and we protect it, we close, we don't allow new students to come in. And in the first group, which I also would say for you guys, like fall rolls around, your first group in the fall, whatever group you're leading, if you're leading a group, the first one is where you set the tone. The first one is where you set the tone. Like I start, we train our leaders this, every group, first group you start, you say, confidentiality thing, which I told you guys. You miss some out of this group, you're outside of this group. If you're not mature enough in this group, we're going to ask you to step outside of this group. And if a student is showing immaturity, let's say you got a girl in your group, she just the whole time, she talks all the time, she answers every question, she's a problem. Dude, Craig Rochelle says this. It's my favorite leadership quote on culture, from period, but it's from Craig Rochelle. He says, culture is a combination of what you create and what you allow. And you can't allow it as a leader. Can't allow it. So if I got that girl that's she's dominating the conversation, all this type of stuff, you're uncomfortable by it, you're annoyed by it, and every other girl's annoyed by it. That girl will kill that group. She will run every girl in that entire thing off. Those girls will hate coming to that group, not because the group is terrible, because that girl is terrible. All right. And we know she's not terrible, she's just not mature. So what you do is you pull that girl aside, you say, hey, listen, I notice you're talking all the time. You're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. So you lay it out to her, then you say to her, here's what we're gonna do. I need you to correct that. That's a maturity thing. I need you to correct that if you're going to be in the group. And I would explain that to that girl or that guy or whatever. And then you come back in And most of the time it corrects itself because you had that conversation. But if it doesn't, then you might say, all right, you didn't correct it this week. I'll tell you what, we need to have a buzzword. If I give this buzzword training, only me and you know it. When I give that, hey, I'm on to the fact that you won't be quiet, you won't whatever, right? And if that doesn't work, then I say, hey, listen, you're going to have to step out of the group for 6 months, a year, or something like that. Does that make sense? And you're going to have to step away. You say, well, you kick them out of the group? Yes, I kick them out of the group. You're not mature. You're not mature enough for that discipleship deeper group. Yeah, you're back here. You're not ready for this yet. So you're going to go back to the connection group, the ministry environment, all that stuff. And I will meet with you one-on-one. But I'm not going to sacrifice the other 7 girls in the group because one girl can't. But most youth ministries will sacrifice the rest of the girls in the group for the one kid. So that's why half the groups are good, because half the groups don't have that girl in it. And the other groups are pulling their hair out because they have that type of a girl in it. Does that make sense? And you can't allow it. You have to address it and deal with it. Does that make sense? And it really impacts it. Actually, what I found to be true is for that girl, it actually grows them up. I've actually found that it doesn't harm them. It actually calls them up, and it really becomes a discipleship impacting thing for them. I say this, one of my axioms is tension moments create teaching moments. So I never shy away from a tension moment. Every person, the people that are the closest to me in my life, I have had tension moments with. My wife, my kids, my boss, you know what I'm saying? Every person in my life that I love the most, I've had tension moments with. And through those tension moments, they create teaching moments. So if I know I have a tension moment with a leader, with a parent, or with a student, I'm like, praise God, because I know this is about to elevate our relationship, and we're going to talk through this, and this is going to help this person, and it's going to help me. Because sometimes I'm the one who's causing the tension. It's going to help me be a better leader, right? Or whatever.
I have that group, but I have several of them in the group. And Quinn and Lexi and Diane have helped me tremendously with that. But I will say my group specifically, and just children in general that I've dealt with, including my own personal children, there is such a high level of students that have diagnosed or undiagnosed disabilities that doesn't have to do like a conversation is not going to help them. They're way beyond that. The parents are doing everything they can. They're in every therapy. They're taking all the meds. They're doing all the things. And the kid is like, wow. Are they kicked out of the group? How do you leave those kids out of the group? Because there's so many of them.
Well, so I do it like this. I've been doing it like 10 years.
I'm not talking about the punk that just needs a conversation. I'm talking about the student that really
So here's the thing. We never have any problems. So I don't have like, oh, we have 100 kids that we've had to kick out of groups because of the problems that we've had. It's not like that. But here's what I will say in those type of situations. I have to ask myself the question. If I got a student in that type of a situation, I believe this to be true. This is another way that I think about it. You can't program for the exception. And so I would say this, that I can come up with this 3% of students that everything I do in my student ministry is not going to work for. But I cannot sacrifice my influence with the 97% for the 3. So what I would say is I would say, no, you get creative with it. So here's how I would do it. I would say, this girl's got some stuff going on. It's not helping her being in this group. That probably brings up some anxiety when she's in the group because of some of this stuff. And it's causing maybe some of the outbursts or some of the stuff that she's doing. It's actually better for her and for the group if I remove her from the group. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove her from the group, but I'm going to meet with her one-on-one. Not me, like you. Like you're responsible, you're her group leader or whatever. Or somebody. It's like, you got someone that, hey, there's a leader who's in the ministry, and she's, she hasn't yet, she's not leading a group yet or something, but she's newer to the ministry or something like that. You're giving her an opportunity. But I would say then you meet with that person one-on-one. But there is a level of maturity for that type of a group that you're going to do. Now, again, I don't know how y'all structure things. So again, I'm speaking out of being naive here. I'm just spitballing stuff. But I'd say like something like this. Like for us, we have we don't have Sunday school. So in a Sunday school environment, you have everybody comes on Sunday with their families. Kids come down to the student ministry space or whatever you're doing, and then they break out into rooms and everybody kind of goes to a Sunday school thing or something like that. Then you do it based on grade school or however you're doing. Does that make sense? In that case, it's much more difficult to draw them out than it is if it's like, oh, we do life groups on a Sunday that's Tepper, or we do life, we got our groups after the ministry night on a Wednesday night where we can do something separate. Does that make sense? But I definitely think you have to have the conversation and then you have to figure it out. I will not sacrifice a group for an individual. That is not in ministry, I won't do that. And I'll tell you why. Because it sounds harsh. But I'll say this. My first 10 years of ministry, I sacrificed a group for the individual. And the amount of kids I ran out of my church because I wouldn't address the one. When your group starts with 8 kids and it goes to 3 kids and you just ran off 5 kids because of that one student, would I rather do something separate with that one student to keep those other 5? Well, for me, Kingdom Math would say yes. Does that make sense? Leadership is hard, and these things are hard. And when leadership problems come up, as a leader, you try to figure out how to solve them. But if you're going, it is not working for this girl to be in the group. She cannot be in the group. And I don't care what her story is. You just have to figure out what the solution is now so that you can keep ministering to that girl, discipling that girl, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? If my son's in, let's say my daughter's in 4th grade. If my 4th grade daughter can't socialize properly in her class, and she's causing disruptions all the time in her class at school, then they're going to do a parent-teacher conference with me. And then they're going to do it again. And then the principal's going to get involved. And then at some point, they're going to say, it ain't working out. You know what I'm saying? So,
I do.
you
I
know,
do know
it
what
ain't
you're
working
saying.
out. You know what I mean? And so, yeah.
I just want to ask, is this Sunday class?
Yes.
So for the group, this represents 11 different classrooms of kids.
Yep.
We don't have enough teachers in here to spread it throughout 11 and have a co-facilitator. And my suggestion will always be that we have a co-facilitator to manage that talkity-talker, because they do have their small group or their little clusters of friends, or that one dynamic. And if you're in there as a single individual, my second suggestion is we blend classes so that then you can increase the ratio of control measures within that class. Otherwise, burnout, you see what I'm saying? Chain
Yeah.
effects. But what do you say to that?
Well, I have 2 small group leaders for every group. And I will not start a small group without having 2. I think it's important for accountability for the leaders, but I also think it's important for consistency. Because, for example, let's say you're a male leader and you're leading the guys group along. You got the flu this weekend. You can't be there. What am I going to do with that group? Let me tell you what most churches will do. They'll shove your group in now with his group. Well, what did I just do right here? You know what I'm saying? And so then we're always solving the problem. But if I got 2, you got the flu this weekend, no big deal. My man right here just steps up and y'all are already leading together anyway. The students already have relationships with him. Versus me messing up and throwing off his group, I do that. Does that make sense? But again, let me say this. Again, the Sunday school sort of dynamic is an interesting dynamic. It's easier to navigate some of these conversations midweek, kind of how you're doing groups like that. And I'll say this because again, I don't know. Do you guys typically tell me what is your structure? You have
We have Sunday groups and we do Wednesday midweek as well.
I think contextually what would help is like the way you're describing how you do your groups is how we do discipleship. So like for girls, we discipleship groups after a certain point, like they're closed, they track with everything you're saying.
Discipleship is outside of our typical Wednesday. And
So I'm saying, well, I guess what I'm asking is Sunday morning, you do.
Grade level.
regular Sunday.
Right, but you do Sunday school and then church.
Church then
Church
Sunday.
and then Sunday.
Church and then Sunday school.
Yep.
And the whole church kind of does that or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Y'all do 2 services on a Sunday morning at church?
No.
1 service in Sunday school. And so you got some dynamics, there because you have parents there or whatever. But this is where you go. If it was me, I'm just gonna tell you how I would do it. If it was me, I would sit down with that girl's mom and dad.
I think what you're missing, what I'm saying though, is that my group in particular, I have problem girls
Yeah.
that just need a little spanking to get themselves straightened out. And then I have other girls that there's something else going on. There's a level of disability.
Yeah.
And I say that and I can see the difference because my own children are that way.
So here's what I'm
there's
saying.
there's kids that just need to
Yeah.
be spoken to, and kids that are almost more like in a wheelchair that they're never going to get out of.
Okay, so listen. Discipleship groups, the life group that I do here, that's the kid I'm saying you got to step out of. Not, this is, I would view almost your Sunday school more like a connection group.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're all there, they're all hanging out. I think though you have to go, here's the dynamic of my group. You know what the dynamic of my group involves? I cannot sit here and teach them the Bible for an hour. It ain't gonna work. So you have to know the dynamic of your group. Maybe you're going, I'm only teaching them the lesson for like 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And then we're doing something relational. We're doing something different because where my girls are at are not there. Does that make sense? You might have to change up a bit how you're trying to disciple them, in order for it to work effectively with them. It sounds to me like these girls need a lot of love. They need a lot of attention. They need a lot of relationship. So if it was me and I was in that group, I would tell that leader, look, I know we have this plan. I know I gave you this structure. I know I gave you this. I will do what I can't do for all the time. I will make exceptions all the time. Not all groups are the same. So I'll say, you know what, for your group, we're going to do something a bit different. Also, what I would probably try to do is I would identify maybe who those girls are. And if there are some situations where it is like really distracting and really bad, dude, I would, as a youth pastor, probably sit down with the parents and say, let me tell you what's going on. Is there some things we need to know about because we're having some discipline issues and this is what's happening. And if you have some real examples and this is what's happening, and talk to the parents about it. And the parents are like, we are having some challenges. And here's the things going on. Hey, we want to be able to obviously help you out, disciple her, help her in this situation. But also we recognize that we have these other girls in the group as well. And there's a lot of tension that this is creating. How can we find a solution? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it, well, she needs to go to your Sunday school class, Mom, because she's not, can't, you know what I'm saying? Again, I don't want to spend too much time on like one specific circumstance. I'm more talking about if you have a group that is for the discipleship type group, and you got a kid who's saying, I want to go deeper. You got the deeper kids in there, and that kid, one girl in there is just being crazy or whatever, or guy or whatever. You have to address that one student. In a circumstance like this, you're kind of a bit stuck on what you're able to do based on the structure of how your church has it structured. So in that, then you have to, as a leader, go, all right, this is a problem. I'm not the only person who feels it. The other girls feel it too. What is the solution? I might need to talk to their mom. I might need to figure this type of thing out. I still, though, would not, if there's one student that is like, they just take over the whole group and they are just so much, you just have to talk to the parents and say, listen, this is a consistent problem. We want her to be in the group, but it is literally, she hijacks our group every week. And so it's either she has to be able to figure that out emotionally or whatever, or we're going to need to figure out an alternative for her during that time. And I think that's a better way to say it. And you, Mom and Dad, what is a good solution we can come up with or whatever?
We don't know.
And the family will appreciate that because they know, they
No, they don't. We don't know. I can tell you. We have no idea what the answer is.
Yeah.
So on a broader set of what we've just talked about, you kind of reinforce some things that we tend to see and do. But I think there needs to maybe be a healthy green light effect to the volunteer teachers. That it's okay to go off script. It's okay to manage these situations. We call it, like in the adult wing, we call it letting the Holy Spirit work.
Yeah.
You go off script and it's the Holy Spirit. In the youth, well, we got a problem here, or we got a thing that derail us. And I think we need to blend those two ideas to really soften the effect, to really, like you said, the Sunday structure with the classroom environment. We need to break out of that mold of, it's not, punching a time clock and teaching an entire 15-page lesson. It's relationships, right? Vulnerability, development, sprinkled with some memory verses, maybe even some kind of printed out takeaway they can resonate with throughout the week. And then leave it like that. Let the Holy Spirit do what the Holy Spirit.
Well, for sure, there needs to be you need to have flexibility to lead your students where they are. If you have most of your students are right here, then you're going to lead the group differently than if most of your students are right here. And if you have students that are a broad range, then you might, which is probably most of them. So you might have some weeks are a bit more like this, and some weeks are a bit more like this. And you kind of have to kind of adjust and kind of flex with it a little bit. Now, what makes youth pastors uncomfortable is when you say, oh, you can go off script and you can kind of do whatever, because there's always the one leader who's going to go way off script. You know what I'm saying? And so there still has to be a, but this is where we're taking students guardrails. I'm not saying this for you. You don't strike me as a person who's going to go way off script. I'm just saying,
I don't know.
it is possible. The leaders that didn't show up today, there's somebody that might, step out of those guardrails. But I would say, for sure, this goes back to the development conversation and personalizing it to your students and trying to help them get it in the way that they get it. I agree with what you just said 100%. In fact, and I'll tell you this, from a small group standpoint, this is how we train our volunteer leaders in our small groups. And our small groups are 2 hours long for our high school students. I tell my leaders, if you're talking more than 20% of the group, you're doing it wrong.
Bingo.
And we trained them, here's how you lead discussion, here's how you do this, which I'm totally fine during the Q&A time talking about that. But I'll say this because sometimes what happens is you get the sheet or the sheets or whatever you have with the curriculum and the content or whatever, and you feel like, I gotta grind through this whole thing. All right, we're taking a rabbit trail here, we're taking a rabbit trail here, we're taking a rabbit trail. Let me tell you, I hunt the rabbit trails, because that's what they want to talk about. And sometimes it actually leads to some of the best discussions and actually leads to building some of this right here. Obviously, if it stays too far off on we're talking about soccer, I'm going to bring it back in. But if they bring up something spiritual that might be a bit off track, I might hunt that a bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to let that happen every week, dominate the whole thing, all this type of stuff all the time. But for sure, you have to use a bit of your, a bit of flexibility there to do that. And I think that really helps the students that you're leading, know that. You know what I'm saying? Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna, sorry, we both had our hand up. Sure. I was just gonna say that, I think Lexi and Quinn do a great job of that. At the beginning of every lesson is the object is discussion. It's at the beginning of every single lesson. And that need to get through the list is self-imposed. That's certainly, I don't feel that from you guys. I get that if a girl start asking a bunch of questions, I go, okay, girls, step in, answer their questions. What would you say to the answer to that? Because like you said, it's to get them talking, not to do all the talking.
If I got 7 questions, that's how, if you got 7 questions, you ask the first question and it develops in this robust discussion, who cares about the other 6? Let's go. Let's get in it. You know what I mean? Into that, because, and I think, and as a professor, I've learned this as well. What I've learned. So we just had our assessment day, and at assessment day, they basically assess all your courses, and students come in and they get feedback, and it's anonymous, and it's they can say whatever. You know what I mean? And every year when they do the assessment, I have this one class where I do 4 to 5 Q&A days. And these are basically days where, I'm an apologetics nerd. So these are days where I'll come into class and I'll say this. I'll say, today's a Q&A day. When I do, everybody's like, yeah. They go crazy about it. I say, today's Q&A day. You can ask any question you want. Bible, theology, ministry, whatever. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. Family, relationships, children, whatever. You can ask whatever question you want. And they'll ask questions for 50 minutes of the class, and I just answer questions. And that thing, and I say this to them, professors, sometimes we're hammered through our PowerPoints, we're hammered through the content, teaching you the things you feel like you need to learn. But the students are sitting there going, I got this list of questions, these lists of things I'm thinking about, these lists, you know what I'm saying? I think that sometimes, to me, that curriculum guide or whatever is for you to leverage so that you can elicit some type of discussion and conversation. So I'm not saying you don't need to go in there every week today we're doing Q&A day in Sunday school. Don't do that. But I'm saying that I'm learning with my students from all their feedback is that they love just being able to be I got some questions, man. I just want to talk about this. But sometimes we go, all right, we got to get to question number 2. We got to get to question number 2. We only got 30 minutes left, and it's you know what I mean? Allow the movement of the group to be able to kind of lead into that discussion. You know what I'm saying? I think that's really important. All right, good.
I'm just really interested in that you said that there's not Sunday morning drinks at your church.
Oh Lord, you're about to get me in trouble.
But I'm interested in that because on Sunday mornings, what I see in my group is is we have a core group of girls who want to learn and want to be taught and they want to grow and they want to do this.
Yeah.
And then we have girls that pop in sporadically and bring all of their baggage with them.
That
and
prevent
they
that
have-
from happening.
That prevent that from happening. And then we have the girls who are put in there because their parents want to be in a class and so we're just, they're just sitting there and they're totally disengaged.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
So you're trying to disciple them all the same and they're
So-
not the same.
and a lot of times I feel like we walk away and none of us really accomplished anything. It feels like a babysitting 45 minutes because there's so many different pieces of it. So I feel like these girls, what they really need is to be in a disciple group
Yeah,
outside
that's right.
Sunday morning. And I think that Lexi can probably feel this pain. I don't lead one of those groups because the volunteers are so few and already so,
Well,
tapped out on my.
Well, let
life.
me say this. Let me say this about this. Is why I mentioned at the beginning, and I want to encourage you with this. You are making a difference, and what you're saying is getting through. And though it feels like maybe hurting cats and all the different places, what I'm talking about is sharpening the sword. But what I'm saying is that even when the sword, the sword's a little bit dull, it can still cut through. And what you're saying is still getting through. And don't think for a minute that it's not making a difference. And it definitely, I promise you, it is. Now,
So how would?
well, I'll say this from a philosophical standpoint. All right. When Thomas Road approached me about leading their student ministry at Thomas Road, I was in a meeting with the executive leadership team, Jonathan Falwell, and their whole executive leadership team. I'm sitting in the room. They asked me about it, and I told them, I said, I don't have the margin. We started talking, and I said, would you pray about it? I said, okay, well, here's the deal. I will pray about it, but there are 3 things that would have to happen in order for me to do this. One, we were going to a different church. So I said, I will never work at a church again that I wouldn't attend. So I said, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attend church here for 8 weeks with my kids. And if my kids don't get connected here, we're not coming here. And it's a no. That's the first thing. Second thing is, if there's a leadership decision that needs to be made, I'm not going through any committees. I'm not going through any leadership, anything. If I say it's going to be done, it's got to be done. Because I'm not going to waste my time going into a place where you've already told me the student ministry is in a bad spot, and then have to pull teeth to make any leadership decision when obviously massive leadership decisions need to be made. Now, that's just from me being able to be in an amazing culture where we were able to make whatever decision we want, but then also being at other churches where I could never do anything to move the ball down the field because there was a committee that shut down everything. All right, and I'm not doing that. The third thing that I told him was, you're going to have to move student ministry off Sunday morning. And if you're not willing to move, they've been doing student ministry on Sunday morning for 40 years. I'm like, if you're not willing to move student ministry off Sunday morning, I'm not interested. And the reason I said that, because again, this is me. This is not, every church is different, but this is me. And I'm going to tell you why. And so right now we do 2 services on a Sunday morning at our church. Right now there are 170 middle school and high school students that are serving in our church on Sunday mornings. They're greeters. They're working in the parking lot. They're working in the children's ministry. I was in executive pastor's office a couple of weeks ago, and the next gen pastor was in there. And I said, I want so many students serving in our church that if we were to do something on Sunday morning in student ministry, it would literally shut down areas of our church. Next gen pastor said our children's ministry would collapse if the students weren't serving in our church. And here's why. My students don't need another Bible study. They are at church on Sunday morning with their pastor, and how we were doing it, which is different than y'all. We didn't have Sunday school. They didn't have Sunday. They had a youth ministry service during the first service, youth ministry service during the second service. Students would pick a service, they would go to it, they would attend student ministry, and then they would go home. So they're never in front of their senior pastor. They're never a part of the multi-intergenerational worship, which I like the way you guys do it better. You're doing it better. I like that model better. You're going to do Sunday school. I don't want Sunday school to be in place of the student ministry service, to be in place of the adult service. And there's tons of data on students sticking in the church when they're part of intergenerational worship. Students need to see their parents worship. They need to see their parents engaged in the Bible. They need to see their parents modeling and other adults modeling what it looks like to follow Jesus. I tell my students all the time, I say, listen, I'm not your pastor. Jonathan Bolo's your pastor. I'm one of your pastors. And I tell them that because I want them to get in their head that their connection on Sunday morning is more important than it is on Wednesday night or whatever else we're doing. Does that make sense? There was no culture of that when I got there. It's taken 4 years to lots of work and whatever leaders, to do that. But my point in that is that, so that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's really difficult for students to invite their friends on a Sunday morning to church who are unchurched. Getting up early, coming to church, lost people don't do that. That kid was getting drunk at the party on a Saturday night. I ain't going to church on a Sunday morning when I was lost. You know what I mean? Like, it just wasn't going to happen. It's a really difficult time for kids to really engage. When they're like on a Wednesday, it's a great invite time, right? They're at school during the day, they can invite them, you know what I'm saying? But since you're at a church that has kind of the Sunday school hour, I go maximize it the best way you can. It sounds to me like y'all got a pretty good structure for how you're doing it. Right now, it's just more each individual group figuring out what is the little takeaway that I can do to make my group just a little bit better and stronger.
Right.
You're going to deal with being in a group where, like you said, you've got all different students, all different spiritual levels or whatever. That's just the nature of the group you're in. But that's not the primary discipleship environment or the only discipleship environment. Where I get concerned in youth ministries is when the only thing they do is Wednesday night they do worship teaching, they break out into groups for 30 minutes after, every kid goes to it. Their group's the exact same way as yours is. Your group never gets anywhere, but there's no other outlet for deeper discipleship, which you guys have something like that. So I say, that's great. Now it is, okay, well then in the Sunday morning environment then, what do I need to do maybe in my Sunday morning environment to kind of mitigate some of the things that are going on? Does that make sense?
Right.
And maybe some of that, again, is what I mentioned earlier, is shifting a little bit. Like, hey, this week's gonna be a little deeper, next week's gonna be a little bit more sort of relational, you know what I'm saying? You might kind of shift the way you do some things some weeks, bringing in some of the discussion or whatever. But I hear what you're saying. I think it's the hardest groups to lead when you're trying to lead students that are in every one of these places on their spiritual journey.
Amen.
I think it's really difficult. And I feel that pain, which is why I've been trying to solve it in different ways. And again, I was telling you at the table earlier, I don't even think the way that we're doing it is the best way to do it. It is the best way that I know how to do it. And I don't know anybody else trying to solve this problem. And I'm just trying to figure out how to solve it. So I've been able to solve it with the way we do it. But there's so little research on youth ministry. And let me tell you, I'll be a week from now at this thing called Youth Pastors Metro. And it's like the largest Baptist churches and all the youth pastors come together and all this kind of stuff. I'll be down there next week, kind of representing Liberty or whatever. And here's what I've learned after going down there for 6-7 years and being a part of this thing and hanging out with those two pastors who are all my friends and all this type of stuff. They all do everything the same way. And they all do everything the same way because the student pastor of this church interned at this church before he got hired at this church, or he interned at this church and then he got hired at this church, and then this church stole him from this church, and they just cycle through all the same churches, and they all do everything the same way, and they've been doing everything the same way since 2003. You know what I'm saying? And it's just true. It's just they all do it the exact same way, and I think the Baptists are the worst at it. You know what I'm saying? They are the worst and being nepotistic about what they know. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're Baptists, we got it all figured out. No, you don't. You got like, and I'm looking at this, you know what I'm saying? And I was actually talking to the guy who directs the other day, and he's like, man, we're talking about it or whatever. And I said, hey, let me, we have this, like, we're pretty close. And I was like, I say, what's interesting to me? And his name's Jason Mick, and he's Prestonwood. If y'all ever heard Prestonwood down in Texas, he's their student guy, next gen guy and student guy. And I was like, what's interesting to me? I said, I've been going to Metro for 7 years, and there has never been a student ministry guy speak. Ever.
Well, that's another thing, like.
Ever.
You
They're
kind of
pastors.
sermons, I would love for you to be like, the one up there once in a while.
Oh, come on.
Giving
Oh, he is.
Advocate.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, what?
But I just think, I'm like, let me tell you,
Graduation Sunday.
if I'm a senior pastor and I'm sending my student pastors to a student pastor conference to sharpen themselves or whatever, and none of the speakers are in student ministry or have been in 20 years, like, and again, there's the bounce ideas off each other, but you all do it the same. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to me, I think there just needs to be, and again, I'm not knocking, those are my friends, they're great churches, all this kind of stuff. I just think there needs to be more innovation and creativity. And I think, look, you guys as leaders, take ownership of your group and just say, you know what? Hey, these are my girls, and I love these girls. And I know I know this girl's probably not a Christian. And I know this girl over here, like, she probably called the ministry. And then everybody in between. And then I got the one crazy girl or whatever. And you go, how am I, like, come up with a plan and just be like, how am I can't decide them all the same, but I'm gonna do the best I can. I'm gonna make some adjustments. And I think if you, obviously you genuinely love these girls, which is why you're here and you're concerned about wanting to minister to them effectively. And so I just think that's what I would say, like, have some creative freedom. That's the thing I always tell try to tell our leaders. It's like, you got creative freedom on, like, you're going to use the Book of Mormon versus the Bible. You don't have creative freedom on, you're going to, we're teaching through, this book of the Bible, and you're going to go teach on this random thing over here. Like, there's guardrails, but there's got to be some freedom in there, recognizing the nature of your group to adjust it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll tell you this. And again, this is random on my soapbox deal. In the last, y'all do most of the last one together? Okay, cool. So it won't apply. Which is good. Just gotta be careful what I say. In the last maybe 8 years of ministry, outside of like an event night, like a back to school bash or something like that in my student ministry, the fellow word singer or something like that, I don't think I've done a game one time in my high school student ministry in 7 years. Not one game. We don't have to do games. We have all this fun hangout time pre-service. They do the connection groups, they're doing stuff post-service. So our service is reverent from the moment it starts until it ends. It kills all kids being crazy and all this type of stuff. Like, the first thing I did when I got into Thomas Road Student Ministry, it was low-hanging fruit when I stepped in, is I took all the couches out of the youth ministry space. I took all the 9 square, because they had all the youth ministry space, I took it all out. I was like, we're not going to play in this room. We're not doing video games in this room. Now, the size of your church determines that too. We had another space to do that stuff in, and we do a lot of stuff outside on our Wednesday nights intentionally, and set up a lot of the energy and stuff like that. But I did that in order to create a space where when we go in here, this is about worship and teaching and reverence, and this is where we worship the Lord. Does that make sense? And again, your space might determine what you can do with that, but I just say that because when I tell other youth pastors that I haven't done a game in high school ministry in 7 years, they are like, what are you smoking? How are kids even coming? They don't care about high school. Kids don't care about games. They don't care about games. They don't need games. In fact, when you do a game and you get 3 kids on the stage and you're giving like a gift card away to a winner or whatever you're doing, they do the minute to win a game or whatever they're doing, the only person who cares about those kids on the stage, or maybe they're BFFs, and the only person who cares that you're doing a giveaway is the kid who gets the giveaway. Nobody else cares. Look at the last 2 rows of the room whenever you're doing a game. And I just over time saw this and I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. And our student ministry is exploding. And when I say that to youth pastors, it blows their mind that we don't do games. And I'm like, but why do you do games? Because we've been doing games in student ministry since the 80s. And that's just what you did. That's what you saw. I was talking about this with some really veteran youth ministry guys earlier this week. And I said, I want you to think about this for a minute. The average youth pastor and the average church member, which I think is less for church members than youth pastors. But let's just take the average youth pastor. The average youth pastor has experience and knowledge of less than 10 churches. Here's what I mean by that. I do this with my clients. Think about the churches that you have seen their ministry. Okay, your home church, the church you attend now, and for some people that's their home church. You know what I'm saying? Start going to the church you interned at. Like it's your youth pastor. Well, I interned at 2 churches, maybe. Like when you start going down the list, you go, bro, you have seen 10 churches total. Now here's the deal. Whatever denomination that you're associated with, chances are all 10 of those, or 8 of the 10 were even in the same denomination. So really, a lot of times in youth ministry leaders are borrowing off of their personal experience on how youth ministry should be done. And you get what I'm saying? And it's really nepotistic and narrow on that type of thing. You know what I'm saying? And that decreases even more for leaders. Sometimes I have parents. I had this parent company, and again, I don't recommend do not ever say it. I don't recommend this, but I had this parent come up to me and they didn't like this, something we were doing or whatever, and they let me know they didn't like it and all this type of stuff, this type of kids like this. And I said, well, why do you think that way? He's like, well, it's just, I mean, but like, did you read that in a book? Or was it that 20 years ago you were in a youth ministry and that's how your church did it? Like, what experience are you drawing off of to say that that is how you do it? In fact, how many parents in this church do you think have read one book on how to disciple kids or on youth ministry or anything else? I'll tell you, man, you got strong opinions about things that you know very little about. And I'm telling you, like, that hits. That is the truth and the reality. But the truth is that most people could never say that, or they're going to be in the principal's office or the pastor's office going, what did you say to that woman, that mom? What did you say to that dad? You know what I mean? But that's reality. You know, if I went and started telling, what's your name? If I started telling him how to do engineering stuff, and I've never read a book on it, don't know anything about it, like, you'd be like, what are you talking about? That's what this guy does. You know what I'm saying? And so anyways, and I don't mean that, I'm not trying to say this in a prideful way. I'm just saying, this is the reality way of how things are. And so what I'm saying is, I mean, I think it would be cool. This isn't a part of the discussion. I think it'd be cool for you guys to be thinking about your groups and be thinking about ideas and innovation and how maybe you can do some stuff or whatever. Because like I said, it sounds to me like you guys got great leaders that have great structure and things in place that you guys have that are kind of moving the ball down the field. And then you just got a few little tweaks and stuff that might, you know, kind of adjust some things, and maybe you come up with some ideas that can help with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so one of the reasons we got involved was because of, well, our kids were kind of young, but by the time Sean, our son, was in middle school, we got involved and started serving because of the need to be closer to them, for one. And two, was to sort out the rumors that were coming out of what was happening or not happening in youth. And so I think if there's any kind of advocacy request is from the pulpit, that more parents be more concerned and become more involved to make it a better place.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you this, and this is like, again, a soapbox thing for me. I was doing this youth ministry training thing, youth pastors network thing with Scott Shane Pruitt, and they did this big thing. And I was doing a training on Tuesday night, and one of the guys asked me, well, how are parents involved? And they were asking that whole, you know, kind of talking about parents thing. And I would say there's probably not a discussion in youth ministry over the last 6 or 7 years that has been more sort of pushed in parental engagement, more parent engagement, more, you know, and how to engage parents and all this type of stuff. And, you know, I've done a lot of, you know, because that's the case, you know, a lot of thinking on it and working, you know, and different things. But, and we do a lot of stuff in our city ministry related to that type of stuff. But here's what I've learned to be true. I've learned that if it's not in the senior leader, it'll never be in your church. And if it's not, and I'm not saying that about your pastor, I don't know what's in your senior leader. So I'm just spitballing here. I'm just saying this. So for example, let's say I'm interviewing in a church and they ask me in the interview, so what are you going to do, parents, engage parents or whatever? Here's my response. What are you guys already doing to engage parents?
Right.
You feel me? Because if you think that you're gonna hire me and then all of a sudden magically all the parents are gonna be so engaged with me doing stuff and deciding their kids, like smoking crack, that ain't happening. It's not happening. Because here's the thing. Let's say you're a 15-year-old guy, all right? And then I'm the youth pastor saying, you need to disciple your kids. You need to have a time where you're discipling your kids. You're like, all right. You're a parent, you're like, all right. So you go to your 15-year-old son, you're like, we're going to start doing devotions on Thursday at 7 p.m. every week, from Thursday from 7 to 9. We're doing devotions in our house as a family. We're going to devote our family. He's going to be like, no way. Mm-hmm. Now you're the parent. Obviously you can, you know what I mean? He's not going to be happy about that. But let me tell you, if you are a church that is about family discipleship, and they have been with that 15-year-old kid meeting on Thursday night ever since that kid was 3-4 years old doing it, it's just what your family does. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it starts with the preschool ministry and the elementary ministry, and then the youth ministry builds off of that, but it has to be in the senior leader. So the senior leader on Sunday morning is talking about, parents, it's your role to disciple your kids. Let me tell you something. If you're not connected to our student ministry here, and you got kids in student ministry, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? And the leader is talking about that, because in order for it to get into the parents, it can't come from the bottom up like with anything in leadership. It's got to come from this direction. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think that sometimes that so maybe a part of that might be like, you know, you guys are part of the student ministry. Hey, what if we did this? I've been talking about this, and he's got like great at this. My first couple of years when I was at Thomas Road, when we killed Sunday morning, all right, and when we did that, my conversations with Jonathan Falwell was, listen, man, now you are going to have like 500 middle school and high school students that are going to be in the service on Sunday morning. So you don't need to cater to them in the service, but you need to consider that they're in there. So when you're usually talking and you don't have to include things like school or you're single or whatever. So because what will happen is, let's say a pastor preach on Sunday, like, man, this is for your marriage and for your career and for your, your retirement or whatever, right? And it's like, bro, you just hit everyone over 25.
Yeah.
All you have to do is go, hey, some of you are in here, you're in school right now. And let me tell you, here's how you apply this in school. And some of you right now in your career, here's how you get what I'm saying? Yeah. And again, and I'm not saying you have to do that every week. I'm not saying you have to do it. But what I am saying is you have to consider that they're in the room and bring them into the conversation of what you're talking about. You're preaching this passage and you just taught all these adults on how to apply it, which a lot of them already know how to apply it. And the kids are in the room going, dude, I have no idea how to apply this, right? So some things, again, sometimes impact that, but yeah. And, I'm encouraged that, I'm encouraged by the age of the leaders in this room. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm telling you, the best leaders, and I'm not projecting that I know all your ages. The best leaders I've ever had in student ministry have all been over 35, and all of them. And so because they're committed and they get it and they have some experience in life and college, I do a lot of college students now and they're the flakiest people on the planet. And I drill them. They come in, I'm like, let me tell you something, bro. You missed 3 Wednesday nights. I'm gonna give you a reason to miss Wednesday night. You're driving here and you get hit by a train. You lose both your arms, both your legs, you're paralyzed, you're in the hospital. By all means, you can have the night off. If it's something short of that, you better be here on a Wednesday. Don't you dare come to me and say, well, my best friend had a bonfire in his house because it was his birthday and we're celebrating his 21st birthday. Bro, you tell me that, you ain't serving here anymore. I have to have those conversations because I have all these college students lay a smackdown on them because culture is a combination of what you create and what you allow. I'm not going to allow them to be sporadic like that. These students need them to invest in their life. So, you cannot lead in your absence. You have to be present. Being present doesn't make you a leader, but you certainly can't lead if you're not present. You know what I mean? I'm right time for now.
All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and go on a 10-minute break, and then we'll start up again at 2:15. So if you guys got to go to the bathroom or anything like that.
That's a 9-minute break.
9 minutes.
Are you guys having seniors every year, or is it being followed seniors? Very important. For sure. For sure there is.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's like a 13 chapters.
I have several friends.
All the stuff.
Really excellent churches that are having.
I do wonder, because it's so outdated, you guys have been in it for so long, could you take it,
Back to a
modify
I
it?
have.
Yeah, okay.
I have one here.
Yeah.
Research.
And they kind of feel like there's nowhere to go. Because
Current stories.
it's
For sure.
sacrificing one area or
I'm just
another.
wondering.
Yep.
It's not, you know,
I think a
There's a really good book out, and this is a bit more academic, so you'd have to take, like, he's saying, he's got a workbook, I think he's gonna release the next week or so.
Rick said that many times.
Yeah, but you know what's
Press,
fun?
but, and he wrote a book, it came out last like May, and it was, last summer was like number one on Amazon. Seller, and it's on purpose, finding your purpose, and, but it does, it's from a biblical background, but what he talks about, you know, and it's really targeted to high school seniors, freshmen, in college, people that are kind of figuring out. That's really good, but the workbook stuff is good. The other book is
not, it was like
practical, but academic.
totally flip that.
The workbook is much more practical and accessible. You know what I'm saying? Well, yeah, I'm not saying like what I'm saying. It's just that I might take this as like home model, but it's really good, it's really well researched. I might take that and go, I'm gonna make this like 3 weeks of it. I'm gonna take something up here, I'm gonna make that like 3 weeks, I'm gonna take something over here, you know what I'm saying? Kind of piece something together. What I found is that most resources that I use or come up to, like, they have like 30% of what I want. You know what I'm saying? So I find myself going, all right, I need like this, 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 and this, and then put it together. Who wrote it?
Right.
Y'all did all the girls groups too, the seniors.
So we have both guys.
Oh, they're all together.
They're co-ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah. The only challenge is in a co-ed group is like, guys not gonna go. I'll go say that more else in the room.
Absolutely. Every time.
Yeah.
And that's why I said.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're stronger.
Right.
Just different.
It was an unusual class.
Yeah.
It was almost a shock.
Yeah.
You know, not gonna happen.
No, it was just a great class. Yeah.
It's just,
They were knowledgeable, they were engaged, they were fun, it was just a great.
my first 4 kids in that class. So now it's-
That was interesting.
Yeah.
The leaders coming. So,
Yeah, yeah, and much more so now than ever before. Now it is like, especially individualistic.
I remember, I sat in the
You
same
know what I'm saying?
school.
So everyone's like, they're fine saying like, hey, I'm this or I'm that, or I'm whatever, I don't care what you think or feel.
Really
you just
come on.
to be.
Anyways.
I just need to be asked. He
I
said, I've been praying about it, and God keeps bringing up your name, I want y'all to pray about it and see what you say. And my first thing was, I got kids, my husband felt so drawn
It
towards
was
it.
my,
And I was, I prayed about it, and I did.
Oh, yeah?
Somebody like,
I worked at.
somebody had to say, yeah,
In
you
Caroline
could be
Creek?
good at this. I didn't
That's
know.
great. I didn't know you were.
Yeah.
I was,
How much can I fight going into
I was
sixth
So
grade
Bill,
class?
Caroline Creek was.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I don't want, I've been
Covered
with
nine
mature
top
girls, I
sports
don't want,
teams in the
I love it.
country, and,
I absolutely love that.
Stratton. He's one of the best.
Typically, I can have 8 to 10. Yeah.
He's got a book.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was talking about.
You know what the book is?
They all what?
You know the name of
Yeah.
Find your, discover your purpose.
Yeah.
Something about
I'll just text
Do you
I have staff kids.
Yeah,
I have
text
staff
you.
kids. I have,
We know our
I don't
doctor.
like I have Grace Taylor,
Okay.
and then I have Liliana Mazingo.
super patchy.
Yeah, so we have staff kids.
All right, well,
So
appreciate
they're
it.
everything.
Yeah, man.
They're pretty school.
And my
And
best
you know-
daughter.
Here you go.
My best
Your
child.
daughter is doing great.
Your purpose is life.
She sits right next to me and she participates and she talks and she answers questions and she's doing great.
That class is so
Yep.
strong.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I was just listening to what